Are we ready? We're hot. We're hot. Okay. Okay. We're going to get started so that we have the maximum amount of time this evening for the event. I'm Sandy Bahan, and I'm co-chair of the League of Women Voters here in Norman. I'd like to welcome you all tonight. We really appreciate the turnout. I was counting bodies, and when I got to 60, I quit because I thought we're way ahead of schedule already. So that's terrific. We're really happy to see you. The League always has candidate forums during the election cycles because we feel it's important that citizens have a chance to meet the candidates, ask them questions, and find out a little bit about what the candidate's position is on various issues. It's important for you to know that the League is nonpartisan. We never take a stand on candidates, not in supporting any candidate. We will take positions on issues that are related to the League and its positions at the national level from time to time when we feel that that's appropriate. But we are nonpartisan, and our events are nonpartisan, and we try to be as nonpartisan as possible. And just because our name says League of Women Voters, that does not mean that men are not allowed to be a part of the group. We welcome them. In fact, we do have several members. Mr. Hickman, I think, is a member of the League of Women Voters, actually. So just so you know, and actually the League was started by men back in 1920 to help women be educated voters. And that's the whole purpose of the League, is to have educated voters and to encourage participation at every level of government in the election process. Our moderator tonight is Liz Pierce. Our first session from 6 to 7 will be the mayoral candidates for Norman. The election is February the 12th. Also included on that night will be city council, and that part of the program will begin about 7:15. And also on that day, keep in mind that it is a school board election for one of the wards. I think it's Ward 4, correct? Yeah. And also on that ballot is the school bond referendum. So you need to get as much information as you can at that, because that's a very important election coming up on February the 12th. At this point, I'm going to turn it up. A couple of things you need to know. When you came in the door, you were handed a card and a pencil, or offered a card and a pencil to write questions on. If you write your question, just one question per card, hold your hand up. We will come and pick your card up from you, take it back to the readers at the back, and they will sort through them, and then we will bring them up to Liz up in the front. The reason we do this is primarily because we get a lot of repeat questions, and so we try whenever possible to sort through, and so that we don't get a lot of repeat, and we keep moving on to other questions, and also to take out questions that might be inappropriate. You're free to ask questions of an individual candidate if you want. Address your question to an individual candidate, or they can be addressed to all the candidates that are up on the podium. And do I have any questions before we start? Remember, one question per card. If you need more cards, raise your hand. We will bring them to you. Be happy to. We will come and collect your cards after you have written the question on it. So that's the way this works. Any questions? Okay, Liz, it is yours.
Thank you. And so we'll begin with 2-minute opening statements, and Bria Clark will be our first.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the invitation. You guys always put on a great forum. It's as much fun to participate in as it is to watch because it's so well organized. So thank you again for the invitation. So we are in an important time of change and transition in our community, and Norman needs a leader that can bring us together to move us forward. I have a track record of positive hands-on leadership and over 10 years of experience in various city and community positions. I have existing relationships with all of our city partners and many community organizations in Norman, and I believe that my experience, coupled with my ability to build relationships, will allow me to set a much-needed tone of civility and collaboration that is currently missing in our community. While our form of municipal government limits the powers of the mayor position, I do believe that my skill set and experience will allow me to be an effective mayor in addressing the current challenges facing our city. Strong communities deserve strong leadership, and I am that leader. My platform isn't an idealistic list of lofty goals, but more a common sense approach to major challenges facing our city. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy getting idealistic from time to time, but we have a long list of unfinished work in our city that needs to be addressed. Everything from the comprehensive plan to the ADA plan update to short-term rentals to what we're going to do about public transportation. All of this are things that we need to be working on. In short, I would also like to work on strengthening our neighborhoods. I think relationships have gotten a little caustic in this city. Blame social media if you will, but it's time to get back to having good old-fashioned face-to-face conversations with one another and being neighbors. We need to increase walkability and accessibility, move forward on initiating our sustainability plans, and again, work on rebuilding our relationships with city partners. I would love your support on February 12th. Thank you.
Thank the League for this wonderful opportunity to speak to everybody tonight. I am an active member of the League and have been for several years, and it's a wonderful organization, and so I'm happy to be here to speak to you. I've been in public service for over 25 years now, since the time I was a young man and graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy and served my country in the Air Force, through the time that I coached my daughter's soccer teams, to being a Cub Scout leader, to volunteering at all kinds of local and municipal nonprofits, as well as being a former Rotary Club president. I never thought I'd be a politician. I'm not a chosen, selected heir apparent to take over this position, and I'm happy to have a chance to be a voice for the people, because I think that's what we need right now in this community. Somebody who will speak on behalf of you whenever issues come before City Council and for City Hall. Over the time I've been a public servant, I've been known as a person who has a bold, visionary leadership style who will bring people together to get things done. But also at the same time, when there are challenges that need to be addressed, I'm also known for somebody who will stand up and speak up for the people and challenge the status quo when that's necessary. But at the same time, we need to ensure that we continue to have civil dialogue in this town and that we all eventually work together for the community that we love and make it the best place it can be for our children and for our grandchildren, which is why in part I support bringing quality jobs to our community. And I am completely opposed to the TIF. I support ending the TIF, balancing the budget, and I will not support a publicly funded arena. At the same time, we need to complete the senior center and get that done as soon as possible. The people have waited long enough for those promises have not been delivered upon. And I support the city finally delivering on the promises that it's made, that it has not delivered on, which includes the senior center, as well as school resource officers to protect our children in our schools. This is an important election, and I encourage you all to get out and vote on February 12th, because the future of our community is what we're voting for, how we're going to go forward in the future. So I would ask for your support on February 12th. Thank you.
Now, drafted one question for the candidates to address. And then after that, I'll be asking only questions from the audience. So that's what makes our forum unique. So please put some thought into a question, write it on your note card and hand it to the ladies back there, and they'll forward it down to me. So we'll begin with the first question. And because we just have two candidates here today, we'll just alternate who goes first. And so we'll start with you, Bill. And so this first question is, over the past several months, the community has been divided over several issues: North Park TIF, the arena proposal, the senior center, the stormwater utility, CART, to highlight a few. As mayor, what do you see as your role in bringing the different community groups together to find workable solutions to these and other challenges facing our community? Which of those issues facing our community would you identify as most immediately in need of resolution?
I think as the mayor, it's important that you show the leadership necessary to bring people together. I have the experience and leadership to work with all kinds of different people, whether at the university, at the county, or at the school district. I'm a collaborative leader, that's my style, and give everybody an opportunity to participate in the conversations and have a seat at the table. But at the end of the day, we have to deal with the issues that are before this community. And those issues include ending the TIF to balance the budget, telling the OU Foundation that we do not want to pay for an arena for the university, and building the senior center now as promised to the people that have been waiting for it for nearly a decade. Those are the priority issues that I see that we need to address in this community based on this question, as well as ensuring that we move forward in a collaborative process. It's wonderful to work with our partners, and I am fully in support of doing that. But at the same time, the mayor represents the people of Norman and has to be willing to sit at the negotiating table and negotiate and represent the people. And I've been a negotiator all my life.
Bria?
Thank you. As I said earlier, as a mayor, I would set the tone of civility, respect our partners, and go back to having face-to-face discussions instead of making confrontational and unrealistic demands from the dais. We also need to include all of our council members as we approach these tough issues so we can truly work together as a team, and all of the council members. I also support ending the TIF, but that's not a long-term solution to our budget, so I don't want you to think that it is. I support a stormwater utility because if we don't do something, the amount that is already coming out of our general fund will increase. I also think that we need to be mindful of public transportation. While my timer didn't start, so someone better flag me down. While I also support a senior center and no to the arena, I think we need to be looking a little bit more forward in our community. We have a real problem with public transportation going away, but it's also an opportunity to re-envision what that will look like so it will better serve Norman residents. And to be fair, I'll stop talking.
And so, Bria, I'll address this question to you first. What specific things should cities do to promote economic development?
That's a great question. I think economic development has also almost become a dirty word or phrase in our community because it's often associated with things like TIFs, and TIFs are certainly not the end all and be all of economic development. I believe that it's a tool in the toolbox, but we need to take a more holistic approach to what economic development looks like. It needs to be focusing on our infrastructure so our residents can get to businesses and support them. It needs to make sure that our businesses don't flood every time that it rains. But it also means inclusivity. When businesses move to Oklahoma to take advantage of a lot of the incentives they're getting from the state, I want them to pick Norman to have their business because their employees feel most comfortable and welcome in our city. So there's a lot we can do with economic development, but we need to be looking at it from the bigger picture and a far more holistic approach as we look to create jobs and expand our sales tax base.
Thank you. Bill?
For economic development, it's important that we focus on quality of life. That's the best way to get the people that are here to decide to stay here, as well as to attract employers and potential employees to move to this community. By having the best quality of life in town, that's the best parks, best facilities, best senior center, best youth sports facilities, all things of that sort. That's how we can help to attract quality jobs. One of the things I've talked a lot about during this campaign is the importance of having quality jobs, a job that pays a living wage and provides benefits, a job that hopefully will help to bring people to this community and raise those folks that are here in this community to a higher level, but also attract people like my son and my daughter who are college-age kids who are looking for jobs right now after college, and they can't find jobs in Norman. And that's very concerning because I want my children and my grandchildren to be able to live in this town and be here with me, but right now there are not jobs for them. So I think that's one of the key things the mayor needs to do is to work on attracting quality jobs.
And thank you. An audience member provided a follow-up economic development question. And I'll begin with you, Bill. Do you support or oppose the use of city funds for economic development to lure new businesses to Norman, even if that results in a loss of tax revenue?
Well, it really kind of depends on the type of jobs we're talking about and the type of funds. I do support, for example, having a Norman Development Authority, which many of our neighboring communities also use, like Midwest City, Oklahoma City, Tulsa. In my day job as an attorney, I've worked with those development authorities in those communities and have seen the effect that they can have. A development authority can really be vital to revitalizing depressed parts of the community and to bring back businesses and opportunities for the folks living in that area to improve their quality of life. So there are certain types of economic development opportunities that we have not really pursued in Norman that I think would be something that would be worth having a community discussion about. There are also urban redevelopment plans, such as the one at Kendall Whittier in Tulsa that I've also been involved with, which are under an urban redevelopment program that allows the city to have an opportunity to revitalize an area that's been depressed, such as, for example, there have been discussions about the North Flood area here in Norman. So I think there are other options available to us to consider.
Thank you, Bria.
I think a way that city funds are currently supporting economic development is through our participation and partnership with the Norman Economic Development Coalition, but also through things like Visit Norman. When we support them and we do quality of life projects that can help bring visitors and tournaments and put heads in beds, that is a way when we are in a city in a state that makes cities rely so much on sales tax that we can contribute in that without getting involved in other incentives. But I do think we should look at it. I have no problem looking at what other communities have done with this area and taking good ones. But we need to recognize that we're not Oklahoma City. We're not Tulsa. We're Norman. And what may work there might not work here. Doesn't hurt to do your research. Any responsible mayor will do their research and will look at the numbers when presented with a proposal, but it doesn't have to bind us. We need to be mindful of what people are comfortable with as well.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. It's Monday night. I'm a little slow. Okay. This is a really good question. And so you're first, correct? How do we engage a bigger cross-section of our population in the political process and focus on economic and ethnic diversity?
I think we need to reach out to people directly where they are. We had a similar question in the Racial Justice Forum. And I think that, for example, with our boards and commissions, I don't really know how we advertise that. So unless you're in the in-group and you know that this is what we do and how to apply, how would you know to reach out? So I think that we can better advertise opportunities to get involved, but not just advertise, actually be there. You know, I love that the League of Women Voters does their voter registration to libraries. That's a great place to start. I think hitting the schools, more Norman Technology Center to make sure that they're included. I think that's the best way to ensure it is to very much walk the walk as much as talk the talk. I mean, some people feel disenfranchised and don't trust our city. And I think by getting out and showing you care and personally inviting them to be involved, but then following up and listening are going to be crucial for creating that kind of diversity.
Thank you.
This question does get to a fundamental public trust issue I think we have in this community. And it is important, as I've said before, that the leader, the mayor, as well as staff go into these marginalized communities and talk to them directly, because they're not going to come to us. And we have to be willing to go and talk to them and also be willing to talk to them in their language. One of the other forums I discussed how we need to have some of our forms in Spanish. We need to have utility workers here at the City Hall who can speak Spanish. So when people that maybe sometimes don't feel comfortable coming to City Hall are not able to call and communicate, that we have the ability to communicate with them as well as with our officers. 5.4% of our population, the highest percentage besides biracial, is the Hispanic population. And part of being inclusive is being available to everyone and being able to communicate with everyone. Also, it's also important that the mayor be collaborative and be willing to bring people together to work together. I had discussed having a racial and social justice roundtable if I became mayor to give an opportunity for all communities to have a seat at the table. And as a Native American, that's very important to me.
There are several questions from the audience related to sanctuary city status. Bill, what do you think are the pros and cons of Norman becoming a sanctuary city?
Well, there are a lot of legal issues associated with becoming a sanctuary city that we have discussed in the past as a council and have presented some degrees of roadblock. But I've also commented on a similar question to this before, where there are things that we can do as a community that make our community more friendly to immigrants and to all potential marginalized communities. For example, when our officers pull somebody over, they don't have to ask them for their green card or for some evidence of their immigration status based on their looks or the language that they speak. And those are kind of things, that's an example of the kind of things that we can do as a community to be more inclusive and to more friendly to everybody in our community, regardless of how they may appear or the language that they may speak. Whether or not we can actually get to the point of what being a sanctuary city really raises some serious legal issues and challenges with our police department, with the federal police. but to the extent we can protect our residents, I'm happy to have those conversations and explore those in a manner that would be collaborative for everybody.
Thank you. Bria?
Councilor Hickman's correct. There's limitations on what we can do legally, but there's not limitations on what we can do to be inclusive, to reach out to people and make them feel welcome and safe. And I think that's the priority that we need. It's making sure that we not only have procedures in place, but training in place to help with our police officers and collaborating with the county as well. I would also think that we could do more with perhaps a hotline, because I know that I've built myself up as an advocate enough in this area where people have reached out directly to me when they have seen and shared concerns with our community. So we could build that up and again, build that line of communication. I know that the Xenia Institute is actually having an event soon where they will be talking specifically about this. And that is a wonderful organization that partners with a lot of different agencies. So I look forward to being an active participant and representing the city in that conversation as well.
Thank you. There's always a lot of interest in the senior center. And so there's a couple questions I'll kind of combine and begin with you. What date does OU have to answer on the sale of the land by the YMCA for the senior center? And will there be access to transportation to the senior center and services nearby?
Well, with the senior center, I believe it's the 28th that is on the Regent's agenda. And in this campaign, I've lost all concept of time, but that's today.
That's today.
That's what I thought. Wednesday would be the day that it's on the agenda. And I believe it refers to just the multi-sport facility and the aquatic center. I don't think that's a sneaky way for OU to leave out this land and to put a senior center there. So please don't worry about that. I will be confirming that. But once we get the land, it'll be our land and we can build what we want on it. In terms of transportation, that was why I liked that site. It was central and off of Flood and easier to get to. Robinson's become now that the construction's done there, a nice thoroughfare. But again, as we re-examine what our public transportation will look like, we have an opportunity to make sure it's accessible as we want it and we need it to be.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, so we'll know here in the next few days about whether or not OU approves the land purchase. It's on their agenda. It's on the consent agenda, so it all looks very positive, and we're crossing our fingers. But I will say it's important that everybody understand that in August 2017, Council members Bierman, Wilson, and myself presented the concept of putting the senior center next to the YMCA, along with the aquatic center, the Pisces Project Center, and the indoor sports facility. And at that time in August 2017, there were other council members that presented other ideas, including remodeling the existing library. And since the time I've been on council, I've been a staunch supporter of the seniors, and for them to have a standalone senior center has promised to them. And that's why I'm honored and proud to be endorsed and supported by the former Norman Seniors Association President Jim Jenkins, and other board members like Nadine Jewell, Betty Mafucci, and Dave Beck. And so I will continue to fight for the seniors until we have the 21st century standalone senior center that they deserve. And we will ensure that there is public transit to that site as well.
Thank you. And this question is related to finances, and I'll direct it to you first. In 2 years, the Norman City budget will be on the edge of defaulting. How do you plan to keep the budget in the black?
Well, the first step is going to be to end the TIF and to take the $4 million being diverted from the TIF to put it back into the fund, the general fund and the capital fund. That will help to get us started and will provide a longer lead time to address other shortfalls. Some of those shortfalls also relate to the public safety sales tax, the PSST sales tax, which we are obligated to deliver and provide that to the people. And I'm committed to ensuring that we do honor the obligations that we have to the citizens. But ultimately, what we have to do is to attract quality jobs. We have to bring more payroll dollars, if you will, to this community, so we have more available funds that people are spending to stimulate the economy, to support our local and small businesses. We have to do things to promote our local and small businesses and start up entrepreneur companies and get away from relying upon low-paying retail jobs and the big box stores who take all their money out of Norman, but support our local businesses because they will reinvest back in our community.
Thank you. Bria?
Ending the TIF will certainly help, but again, that is not a long-term solution. I think another key piece of that in securing our budget going forward is the stormwater utility, because we're going to have bills to pay and it's going to come out of the general fund. Our staff is already lean. We have a council that's committed to getting us in the black, but continues to create new positions that we have to fund. And we already have a lean staff, like we said. We're the largest city to not have an assistant city manager. So I think by investing in more staff, we can provide better services. But creating jobs and attracting businesses and retaining our businesses, we should have a plan when we do that. Otherwise, it could be aimless and as not as effective as it could be. So I'm excited for the strategic plan that's coming out soon. I was a member of the Economic Development Strategic Plan Steering Committee, and I think that can help provide a roadmap to look at all of these tools to help us get in the black in the long run. We've got to expand our sales tax base. We've got to have good jobs. But again, we should have a plan to get there.
Thank you. Bria, will you speak first to the issue of transportation? How can mass transit be advanced short and long term?
Well, we've already committed to the RTA, the Regional Transit Authority, and I think that's going to be a game changer. I'm very excited about that. Clearly, we're going to have to rethink our bus system, and there's a lot of opportunities with that as well. When I read the article that the transcript did on the city of Moore passing the RTA, some of their council members' biggest concerns was, well, we don't have a bus system. How are we going to get our residents to the light rail? And I was thinking, well, we've got a similar problem here. So again, that's an opportunity to build relationships and create a new system, possibly with the city of Moore, possibly with Cleveland County. But it's got to be more than just having the system. We need to make sure it's accessible. So I've met with OK Adapt and our organizations that work with our residents with disabilities. And there's issues with what we have, even if we got to keep what we have. For example, with card access, you can get picked up and stay in city limits. You can't get to your doctor's appointment in Oklahoma City. So I'm frankly excited for the opportunity to reevaluate what our.
Thank you. Bill?
Public transportation is really critical in our community because we have so many folks who rely upon it to get to their medical appointments, to go grocery shopping. So it is two-part. The long-term vision with the regional transit system is something that I do support. I think it's a potential game changer for our community. Imagine if you could ride a train from the Norman Depot into downtown Oklahoma City. I've heard some people refer to it as the Thunder Train, right, Rhett? And then one day that may eventually be coming here. But also the flip side of that is we could be bringing people in from Oklahoma City, riding the train down to come shopping at Campus Corner or downtown or to go to an OU football game. We're not that far away from that being a reality, and I'm really excited about that. But with that, we need a robust public transit system that connects to that regional transit. And we need it to be available for those with disabilities. It needs to be accessible. And we can partner, as I've mentioned, as I've previously mentioned, with the county and with the city of Moore to ensure that it's a robust system that's nimble and can be available for all of our citizens.
Thank you. And so I'll address this question to you, Bill, first. How do you see the university intersecting with the needs of the city?
Well, the university is our largest employer, and they are an important community partner. And so it's important that we have good relationships with the university. And as mayor, I will strive to build those relationships and be able to do it in an independent, no conflict fashion. And I think that's very important that we have that kind of relationship with the university so that you have somebody who's representing you, the people of Norman. And I will engage with the university on everything from public transportation to partnering on economic development opportunities, focusing on key niches like weather and aviation, because there's so much that we could do working together. And unfortunately, there is historically been some challenges with the city and the university working together. And I think that those can be resolved through leadership, experienced leadership, and a collaborative approach. And over the time that I've been in the Air Force to being now an attorney and has engaged in numerous negotiations and worked with numerous businesses, I can tell you that that is something that we can accomplish and I will accomplish for you as mayor.
Thank you.
I think definitely need to include them in our conversations, because how many times have you been out and you said, I'm from Norman, Oklahoma, and everyone says, where's that? And you say the University of, and they're like, oh, okay, I know where that's at. So it is a key piece of our identity, but it's not the only piece of our identity. It also brings 20,000 plus residents to our community who need to be involved. It's well known, I believe, that I work at the university. I helped create an office that focused on integrity for young people, and now I run a leadership program. So I don't want you to think that I'm is some sort of executive who actually has any real power at the university, unless you're in the leadership program in the Price College of Business. But we've talked a lot about keeping these students here, getting them to invest in our community. But there might as well be a wall around the university, because so many of these residents don't know how great our town is. And there's a lot of opportunity for outreach there.
Thank you. What would you do to address the homelessness that has grown greatly since the women's shelter on East Main closed?
Well, it's part of having, I think, a secure budget. We have to make sure that the little that we can provide to these kind of services doesn't get cut. We need to work with state agencies to make sure that they provide funding as well. But I think we need to be educated about the challenges facing our community. This past Thursday, we had the point in time count. I was hoping to help with that, but I also teach a class. I was unable to do so. But I have taken the time to go to food and shelter and ask these residents, what are your needs? How can we help you? So I think it's getting out in the community and working with these organizations that deal with this on a daily basis. I'm not appointed to it, but I'm interested in this issue. So I've actually been attending the continuum of care meetings with these partner agencies for some time now. And we have made a lot of work. We have functional zero for our homeless veterans. But as you said, the numbers continue to rise. And we need to get creative on how we approach that and make sure everyone's treated with respect at the same time. I think it would also be helpful to make sure that we're looking at how we handle mental health issues in this community.
Yes, this is an issue. As some of y'all may know, I currently represent Ward 4, which is Central Norman, and that's where a lot of the homeless population is located, as well as a lot of the nonprofit organizations. So I spent a lot of time working on this issue and meeting with folks like Lieutenant Bryant, who's on our police department, who is in charge of the task force working with the homeless population, as well as our community partners to ensure services for them, whether it's housing, mental health, and other services to help get them on their feet and into a better place. And it's been a wonderful experience to work with Lieutenant Bryant and those agencies to see how that process works and how we provide those services. It was very touching for me one evening. I had the opportunity to be a part of one of those interventions with a homeless man in June Benson Park with Lieutenant Bryant. And it was amazing to me to see how he wanted help, but he didn't know how to get that help. And so we can help our homeless population. We have the services in place. We just need to make it more of a priority and focus on the efforts that we have available.
Thank you. Okay, Bill, I'll address this question to you. The Chamber of Commerce has recently been seriously criticized on all ward pages. How do you view the Chamber, and can you work with their leadership for the good of Norman unity?
Well, I mean, I'm proud, honored to say that the Hickman Law Group, my law firm, is a member of the Norman Chamber of Commerce. And I think supporting the chamber is something that's appropriate for businesses to do and individuals as well. I do think at the same time, though, that we need to work collaboratively with one another. Do I always agree with the chamber? No. Do I think that there are times that the chamber needs to listen to some of its membership? Yes. Do I think the chamber has the best of Norman at heart in what they are advocating for and what they want to do with the city? I do, by and large. I think they're all good people and we all love this town. Sometimes we have different goals of how we want to achieve that end purpose. But I can tell you, when the arena debate was going on last year, I heard from many, many small business owners that were frustrated and upset with that conversation. And that's why I was a staunch opponent to that arena and representing those small business owners in this community, like at Campus Corner, Lindsay Street.
Thank you. Bria?
I think every community needs a strong chamber of commerce. I feel like the relationship has gotten hostile, and I think their approach with the arena didn't go over well with residents. I think communication was lacking in that. but I do support small business. I helped start the Eastside Business Association in Norman, which is a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm a member of Norman Next as a young professional. This is the kind of toxicity that's going on in our community. We can't even have a civil conversation about issues anymore. People smirked when we talked about the Chamber of Commerce. We have to hit the reset button. We've got to start over. And I think that whoever's going to be the next mayor has got to be someone that people can trust and that they know will fight for Norman as well. And so I think there's room in our community for the Chamber of Commerce, but I think they're going to have to start communicating better to reach out to all residents, not just the members of their organization.
Thank you. Bree, I'll address this question to you first. Can you tell us your development vision for Norman, specifically about preserving Norman's historic core and what we can do to repurpose and revitalize the empty buildings that were once businesses around town?
Development vision. I think we need to finish our comprehensive plan. I think that, again, will help guide us. I think I'm big on plans. If we're going to spend all this money to create them, we should use them. When it comes to other parts of development, something that question didn't really touch on, but I'm excited about is our opportunities with agritourism. We are actually the second largest city in Oklahoma based on our square mileage, and there's a lot of opportunity I think we have in that area. We do have a state park. We just passed our first agri-wedding venue in Ward 6, actually, which is the ward that I represent. But you're distracting me, Mac. But there's more we could do there. I know that Georgia has a whole agritourism field that they use. So I'd like to see us work in that type of development. But when it comes to preserving our historic core, we absolutely must. That is the personality of who we are. And then again, with our economic development plan, look at how we can help these businesses and perhaps look at a tool.
Thank you, Bill.
Excellent question. As the current Ward 4 council member, I've put in considerable amount of effort and work in protecting our neighborhoods. It's very important to me. I was on the Historic District Commission and worked hard to preserve our historic neighborhoods as well as core Norman. Things that we've accomplished working together are down zonings, protecting over 500 structures that used to be zoned for multifamily that now are only allowed for single family use. I've helped develop creative solutions, creating things such as an overlay district to protect some of the remaining multifamily zoning to help try to prevent any further proliferation of these mini dorms that we've seen in core Norman. As well as we passed the first historic neighborhood in 25 years. As well as we have passed administrative delays to put a pause on the development. This is one area where me and my opponent do have a couple of votes that are different. She voted in support of having an office within a Old Silk Stocking neighborhood that I voted against. And recently she voted in support of a garage apartment in a residential area that I voted against.
Thank you. So this question for you, Bill. Have you considered a senior health center along with the senior center like OKC has? I know those have been popular.
Yes. The long and short is I think that we are considering a senior wellness center that would provide programming for our seniors to, along with for their health and fitness. But in conversations with the seniors, we've also had discussions about expanding the scope of that to include members of our disability community, such as veterans and other members of the disability community. Because oftentimes, even though veterans and those with disabilities may not be seniors, some of the same programming from a health and wellness perspective could be a benefit to them. And talking to members of our disability community, they're excited about that opportunity to also partner with our seniors and to be able to take advantage of the joint programming for services that we could provide at a senior health and fitness facility. And so I'm excited about that opportunity. I think it's important that the senior center be able to provide services to our seniors, but to the extent it can be available for other groups in the community, like our veterans and those with disabilities, that would be a wonderful opportunity to collaborate together.
I think a senior wellness center is a great idea, but I'll be honest, I do have concerns about duplicating resources because it will be right next to a pool and a gym and a YMCA. If we're going to invest that kind of money, I'll be honest, I'd rather see it in a part of town that's not right next to a pool and a gym and a YMCA. If we're going to be wise about money, let's be wise about money. And I think we should learn from our mistakes with the animal welfare shelter. We have a wonderful shelter, but we didn't set aside funding for staff or programming. We need to be mindful of that as well. And so I think these collaborative ideas are wonderful, but we can collaborate with the buildings next to us in this Generation Square to get the most out of that. And I think we should. We're already worried about Norman Forward not having enough money. So I think we need to be realistic with that and have the best senior center possible and meet the needs and be mindful of creating additional senior centers throughout the community.
Thank you. Bria, what changes does Norman need to make and when in light of the UN's climate change report?
Well, we're already behind in that, to be honest. But we were the first city in the state of Oklahoma to pass the Ready for 100 initiative. I was very excited to support that. Even my husband was able to get on board. And that is the first step. But that's exactly one of those plans that I'm talking about, where we pat ourselves on the back for passing a plan and then don't do anything with it. It's time to take action. So I'm ready to move forward on that. I have been spearheading a single-use bag ordinance. And if you followed that last term, that preemptive bill has been reintroduced at the state capitol. So they're already trying to stop us from making decisions on clearly local issues. So I think to move forward with the UN and what their plans are for climate issues, we need to be mindful about what we can do at the city level. I read a fantastic book between Carl Pope and Michael Bloomberg called The Climate of Hope. And it's what cities can do without having to rely on state legislatures, because in the state of Oklahoma, we're going to have to get creative.
Thank you. Bill?
There's a lot that we can do and some that we have already been doing. Taking care of our environment is very important to me. One of the sayings of my Cherokee people is being stewards of the land, and I take that very seriously. Some of the things that we have been doing is working to build an energy efficient home program by bringing the builders and the environmental groups together to promote energy efficient homes, which will reduce the cost of home ownership. I also was proud to lead the efforts to stand up to OG&E when some in City Hall wanted us to rubber stamp a 25-year agreement without any attempt to negotiate, and we did not accept that. And we now are negotiating with OG&E and have seen improvements in our downtown grid, as well as full cutoff lights being installed. So there are things that we have done, like working on a tree ordinance and vegetation management ordinance to protect the citizens and our environment. And I'm committed to continue to do those kinds of things as mayor to protect our environment and to protect our climate so we can move forward in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Bill, when will the sidewalks in Core Norman be repaired and built?
Well, considering that many of those sidewalks go back to the 1930s from the WPA era, it's unfortunate that we have not had more investment in our sidewalks over the years previously. And since I've been on council, I've worked very hard to improve and upgrade the sidewalks. And I'm happy that we have done things like provide safe routes to schools for our school at Lincoln Elementary along Classen Boulevard, a sidewalk that was very unsafe and had been that way for decades, as well as we have secured the funding for improvements for sidewalks along Classen going on down to Brook Street, as well as we've secured funding to improve the sidewalks on Flood Street going from Main Street up to Acres. So while you haven't seen those improvements happening, the funding has been secured and staff is working on the engineering work to make that happen, as well as approving the funding for across Acre Street from Porter to Flood Street, so that now with our new central library being developed, it'll be more connected to the community, more accessible, more walkable, and more bikeable. So we are making improvements, but we're going back, so it's going to take some time.
Thank you, Bria.
I can't really speak to Ward 4, but Councilmember Hickman has his issues with sidewalks because they're so old and crumbling. And in my ward, where there's undeveloped land, we're also missing sidewalks. So similar issue, but different approach to how to handle it. I have long stretches of 12th Avenue where there are no sidewalks, and I've seen motorized wheelchairs in the street. We can do better than that in Norman, Oklahoma. And I hate that we have to wait for land to get developed before the sidewalks get put in. So I have encouraged staff to look at using recoupment, where we put in the sidewalks and then it gets developed, then they have to pay us back. And I think that is the great approach to, again, connecting us. So I think that we have to be mindful of the difference in these sidewalk issues all over Norman. It's not just a core Norman issue, it's everywhere. Why have all of these amazing quality of life projects going around town when nobody can get to them? So we need to make sure that they're safe and accessible. And staff does an amazing job with Safe Route to Schools. I've had some Eisenhower help.
Thank you. Bria, how do you feel about changing our city charter from a strong city manager to a strong mayor type of government?
I would need to be paid more. That is how I feel about that. No, I mean, right now they say it's a volunteer job. I have 2 full-time jobs. One of them I get paid for. One of them I donate my meager salary back to Norman Public School programs and other nonprofits. It really is a labor of love. Could we change it that way? Yeah, we could. I'm very excited about a lot of the charter review issues that we're looking at. While that is something that we could do, if we don't do it, we seriously need to look at term limits in the pay of council members, because it keeps people who don't make a lot of money from being able to participate, because it is so much time. And that is an equity issue. One of the things I'd really like to see, honestly, before we change the mayor form of government, is how we do our elections. I think we should do ranked voting. That would save so much money when it comes to runoffs, when it comes to having elections, when to donating to elections, and that would definitely, for me, be the priority.
I think that's an interesting question, and something that the community can study and look at, and something our charter review committee, citizen committee could also consider. But at the end of the day, I'm an advocate and a big believer in service above self. And right now we are all public volunteer servants as council members. And yes, it can be time consuming. And yes, it can be hard days and a lot of criticism, sometimes with very little thank yous. And that's part of the job. And if you're running for office right now, some of the candidates I see out there, you just need to know that. But I do it because I love it. I love this town. You know, since I was a young person, all of my life, I've always set aside a percentage of my time in my life to serve, whether it was my nation in the Air Force or my community. Everything, like earlier today, I was in the creek at Bishop Creek over in Eastwood Park because I'm a Blue Thumb volunteer. Spent an hour and a half over there collecting bugs because it was that time of the year that we had to do that with Kim Shaw and my friends at Blue Thumb. That's just because if you believe in service, this is what.
Thank you. Bill, what will you do to prevent economic distribution as happened on Lindsay Street with future projects and infrastructure?
Can you read that one more time?
Sure. What will you do to prevent economic distribution as happened on Lindsay Street with future projects and infrastructure? Oh, destruction.
That's okay.
I thought you meant
So
the business is moving. Okay, what will you do to prevent economic destruction
Okay.
as happened on Lindsay Street with future projects?
Okay, well, I think this is a multi-part answer, because at the end of the day, it's not the city's job to be picking economic winners and losers, period. Whether that's because of TIF financing or other forms of government subsidy, we need to be fair to all parts of our community, especially our small local owned businesses like those on Lindsay Street. During the time that I've been on council, I've worked very hard. I'm a member of the Campus Corner Merchants. I'm a member of the Downtowners and regularly attend those meetings, as well as I have lots of friends and supporters on Lindsay Street. And it's very important that as we set policy in this community, that we're mindful of the impacts of those policies. And when we spend your money, or we allow your money to be spent in support of something, that we understand the effects it's going to have. I am a small business owner myself, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that I have to make payroll, I have to pay my health insurance, and that's something that I think is very important experience if you.
Thank you. Bria?
Okay, so how would we help businesses in areas under construction like with Lindsay Street? I know that the city did supported with Love Lindsay. I still have my Love Lindsay t-shirt. I know that we encourage people to shop local, and it's got to be more than that. Like I said, with the Eastside Business Association, help create districts that help specific areas and create partnerships, and we can expand on that. I also think that we have a communications position here in the city of Norman, and I would love it if the Lindsay Street, for example, has a big event coming up over the first weekend of May, and that's going to be really exciting, and we'll draw a lot of people to that area. But we can't rely on people to just know that that's happening. So I would like to see our communications person take a more active role in sharing information in all of the ward pages. So it's not just our job to do that. And I think that's the way that we can support these areas as well, is better communication and even writing letters to the editor in the Norman Transcript.
Thank you. The audience wants to know, what makes you different? What makes you a different mayor than those we've had in the past? What qualities or issue stances are different than your opponent? What makes you stand out and be the better choice?
Okay. 1 minute. I am a Cleveland County Best of Show scrapbooker. No, I'm kidding. In all seriousness, we have a lot of similar votes. I think it's all leadership style. I believe in hands-on positive leadership, doing the work, building relationships, and making a difference in that way. I ran for city council to connect people to local government because I was very involved in my city on boards and commissions and with Norman Public School task forces and PTAs, and I didn't know my leadership. In today's world, I want to feel connected to them. I want people to reach out to me. I love this town, and I've done a very good job communicating what there is going on in this town, and we need more of that. We need civil conversation. We need true team collaboration. Yes, all you have to do is count to 5 to get things done on council, but if any level of government is going to be a team, a real one, it should be local government. And as mayor, I will make that a priority.
When I was getting my master's degree, my MBA from Auburn University, I had to write a dissertation, and I wrote it on participatory management. And I actually did surveys and studied the effects of people being able to participate in the decision-making process on their satisfaction and buy-in. And many people have heard me say from the dais that I'm a process person. So what I mean by that is I believe in true teamwork, collaboration, having people involved in being a part of the process, developing the policy. I'm the kind of leader that rolls up the sleeves and leads, does the work. I'll be the first one in the door and the last one out the door. It's important to me that people understand that when it comes time to get the work done, I'm the leader that will roll up my sleeves and get the work done. I have shown since the time I've been on council a willingness to work across with many different people and many different persuasions, as well as with our community partners. And I will lead in getting things completed. I'm a results-oriented person, whether it's the senior center or ending the TIF. That's the kind of leader that I will bring.
Thank you, Bill. I'll address this question to you as well. Do you support a Norman City Council resolution to apologize for Norman's sundown past?
Can you read that one more time?
Do you support a Norman City Council resolution to apologize for Norman's sundown past?
I think that's something that we need to have a conversation about. It is certainly part of our history and something that I think that we should acknowledge. And so if that acknowledgement is through a resolution to acknowledge our sundown history and the history of this community, I would also add on to that we should also consider a resolution that would acknowledge our Native American history and what we have done and the role that this community, this city, has had with the Native Americans, like the absentee Shawnee tribe, who also is a part of this community. And so if we're going to be inclusive, I think we should be respectful and acknowledge the history we have with both our Native American community as well as our African American community. And I would support efforts in that regard to bring people together, because I think first step of reconciliation is recognizing the history of our past and building bridges so we can move forward together.
Thank you, Bria.
Yes, I would support that. You know, I worked hard with the Bar Avenue, and I can assure you from my experience with that, our community still has a long way to go. And while resolutions are important, and I think it helps people recognize the issues that have happened and where we stand on inclusivity, it really is a piece of paper. We have to do more than just make resolutions. I have helped start the Beloved Community Speaker Series that represents 4 different minority groups where we talk about tough issues. So we actually have these conversations. I encourage you to go. They're always incredibly eye-opening. The next one is Thursday, February 21st at 6:30, the West Branch Library. And we're going to talk about, in light of some recent events, diversity in the 21st century and what that actually means. So resolutions are nice, but I think we need to do more than just put words on paper. We need to put words into action as well.
Thank you. Bria, often see the new scooters on the sidewalks, sometimes several at a time. What can we do? And along with that, can you address how do we protect our pedestrians from vehicles in Norman as well?
Okay, those are two questions. Let's go with the scooters first. I'm chair of the oversight committee. We've passed the agreements to allow them to legally be in our city, and that is the first step. We need to continue these discussions of what kind of ordinances we're going to put in place, and cities do it differently everywhere. I've seen it where they don't want them on the sidewalks. They only want them on the street. And then I've seen where they don't want them on the street. They only want them on the sidewalks. Do we require helmets? And if you've ridden one, which the students described to me as exhilarating, that they're loved, and they, especially in the absence of public transportation in our community. But even it has instructions, don't block the right of ways and all of that. So what I've been telling residents is call the police, call the action center, report them. That is how we're going to make change, but it shouldn't be on residents to have to do that. So I'm looking forward to finishing those ordinances and see how we can address that. And with pedestrians, what was that second question?
Well, how do we protect our pedestrians from vehicles in Norman?
Don't hit pedestrians. Okay, I've got 5 seconds left. Seriously, though, we need to educate people on how to share the road, both bicycles and pedestrians. Okay. I actually got flipped off walking around campus on the way here. It keeps you humble before a mayoral forum because they didn't seem to want to share the road with the pedestrian. And so we definitely need to work on that.
Bill, you get extra time as well.
Well, I support implementing a complete streets effort. A complete street would be one that has quality sidewalks, bike paths, place where pedestrians can be safe in our streets, because at the end of the day, it's critical that our citizens be safe. We've seen all too often, and I've had reports and I've talked to residents who have been injured on their bikes, for example, because of a car. And that's just simply not acceptable. And so in core Norman, the area that I represent currently, we worked hard to improve the sidewalks and to begin to have pedestrian paths put in, like Legacy Trail, as well as bike paths. And that's what we need to be when we're planning for the future of Norman, how we want this community to grow and what we want it to look like. We can begin to implement a complete streets approach so that we have bike paths and sidewalks as a part of all the new road projects that we do. And that is the current plan under the transportation bond that will be voted on by the people. Because at the end of the day, we need to have a community that's accessible, walkable, bikeable, and safe for our residents, and respecting the role of the residents on the street. As a runner, I can tell you firsthand that sometimes when you run on our streets, it can be dangerous. And so having a safe place to run or to walk or to bike is critical for the future of our community.
Sandy, do we need to move to closing? One more question. Okay. Let me find it real fast. Okay, Bill. It is my understanding that the Norman Public Schools has been ahead financially because the state has made up for revenue loss due to the TIF. How will ending the TIF early impact Norman Public Schools?
Well, under the proposal to end the TIF that I was instrumental in drafting and bringing forward to council, it will have no effect on Norman Public Schools. Just so everybody understands that there was a resolution brought forward by staff that removed the sales tax from the TIF, but not the ad valorem, and that would have actually extended the TIF. I led the efforts along with other fellow council members to add to that resolution both sales tax and ad valorem, which would actually lead to ending the TIF. And included in that resolution change, though, was to hold Norman Public Schools harmless so that they would not lose any funding by covering the costs associated with the school resource officer program. And that's a program that you voted on in 2014 that has still not been fully implemented by the city. So I think it's important in two parts. One, that we do not affect negatively the budget of the school district, but two, that we deliver and fulfill the promises we made to the voters by funding the school resource officer to provide for the security and protection of.
As Councilor Hickman has covered, the plan we have won't negatively impact it, but we've got to look for other solutions for supporting Norman Public Schools, just because the TIF would have ended within the next couple of years anyways, so then they would have lost that money. So I encourage you all to support the school bond issue on February 12th. I know that some of you may not have kids in school, but they are seriously the future of this community. And when you live in a state that refuses to do right by public education, it really does put a lot of the burden on local communities. Whether it's fair or not, something I'm incredibly proud of with this community is that we support public education, because it all comes back to economic development. But with public education, my husband's a union electrician, so I would also throw out more Norman Technology Center. I don't think we give them enough love as well. They partner well with Norman Public Schools with their pre-engineering programs. And so I believe we do have the best educational opportunities in the state when you combine Norman Public Schools, the University of Oklahoma, and more Norman Technology Center. So we have to get creative in how we support education, because like I said, that money would have gone either way. So I'm invested in working with Norman Public Schools and a variety of partnerships and seeing how we could help them. For example, with the Ready for 100 initiative, imagine if we had solar panels on top of all 23 schools, how much that could help them with things like electricity bills. So a lot of opportunities there.
Thank you. Candidates, we appreciate your thoughtful answers to our audience questions. And now it's time we'll move to closing remarks, and Bill Hickman will be first.
Again, I want to thank the league for this opportunity and thank all of you that are here tonight watching, both in person and I guess at home. This is a wonderful opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about the candidates, both for the mayoral race as well as the other races to come. As you leave, I want you to hopefully remember a couple things about me. I'm an experienced leader and have been for the last 25 years, both serving my nation as well as running a small business. I've been a community volunteer for my children and for my community. I have a collaborative leadership style that will bring people together to get things done. I'm a results-oriented leader who believes in putting the people first. If you elect me to be your mayor, I assure you that I will always listen to you, I will be honest with you, and I will fight for you. And I will be your voice in City Hall. And if that means from time to time standing up to others, whether that's the University of Oklahoma or members of staff or other council members, I will do that for you like I have in the past. But most of
Thank you. Bria?
Thank you again for this opportunity with these 1-minute answer times. It almost feels like speed dating. But I hope you got to learn more about us. I'll be around for a while afterwards. I do want to get home to see my 2 kids tonight, because it is a commitment. And I love this town. I'm so happy for the opportunity to run for mayor, because Norman deserves a choice. The divisiveness and I think, again, toxicity and drama that has enveloped national politics has managed to find its way to the local level. So when you're choosing your next mayor, you're really going to have an opportunity to choose what you want the tone of this community to be going forward. And I hope you take that seriously, because again, if any level of government should be immune to that and should come together as a team, it's this one. Our kids go to the same schools. We check out books from the same library. We ride the same buses. And I'm ready to bring us together for an important time for our community.
Thank you. On behalf of the Norman League of Women Voters, I want to thank Brenda Hall for taking care of the time, the City Hall staff, our participants, and the audience. We hope this has been a good effort to inform you about important issues of the election. And the vote will be on February 12th. And so we'll end the mayoral section of our forum tonight and move on to City Council. Thank you.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Those of you that are council candidates that are going to participate in this next part, if you are not a current seated council member, I'd like for you to come up so I can show you how the mic system works.
Can we have the candidates up here, please, quickly? Okay, if we can, please, we'd like to get started with the city council portion. Since we have so many council candidates, we want to get as many questions as possible in the time we have here in the chambers. So if you would take your seats.
She said one.
Most of you were here for the last session, but for those of you that are new, I'm Sandy Behan. I'm the co-chair of the League of Women Voters here in Norman. We're very happy to have you with us tonight to hear what these candidates for Norman City Council have to say. They were given a question that will start the program, but after that first question, all the questions will come from the audience. When you came in, you were given a card and a pencil. If you have a question to be addressed to either all of the candidates or a specific ward or a specific individual, write that question on the card and then raise your hand and one of us will come around and pick it up and we will take it back to the screeners. And the reason we take it through the screeners is because sometimes we get similar questions. And rather than ask the same question 5 times, we try to take and put the 3 or 4 questions together and see if we can do one question that will address all of the concerns that people have on that particular issue. And that way we can talk about more things, if you will. But please feel free to address a question to an individual or to a ward, a specific ward, if that's what you want to do. Our moderator tonight is Liz Pierce, and Liz has a list, an order that we have set to start the program, and then she will then work from that order so that everyone gets an opportunity to address the questions if they want. Each person will have a 1-minute introductory and then 1 minute to answer the questions and 1 minute closing. With the number of candidates that we have, it's going to take some time. So we may not get as many questions in the mayoral race, but we'll try to get as many as we possibly can, as efficiently as possible. Couple of things I forgot to tell you. As you check the table out there, you saw a brochure telling you about the League of Women Voters in Norman and inviting you to join us. There's also our latest edition of Who's Who, hot off the press, up to date, as best we can be up to date about who's who in government, from the national down to the local level, and how to get in touch with them. And that, of course, is very important, that you stay in contact with your representatives. I also want to make sure that we mention that on Monday, February the 4th, at the Central Library Lowry Room, the League of Women Voters and Ready for 100 Norman will have an in-depth discussion with 3 experts on solar energy in Oklahoma. And Dr. Jim Roth, who's Dean of the School of Law at OCU, Nick Shoemaker, OEC Systems Engineer, and Dr. Bayram Saparov, researcher in the chemistry department of OU. We'll all talk about different aspects of solar energy. And hopefully we'll be able to have a very lively discussion about that topic as it relates to Norman. The League is nonpartisan. We do not endorse any candidates ever for any office. We do take positions on issues, but we do not ever endorse a candidate. So we invite you to ask questions, to become informed, and to make good choices. The election is February the 12th. It will not only be for mayor and city council here in Norman, but also there's a school board election for, I think it's District 4. And there is a school bond referendum on the same ballot. So it's a very important election for Norman. At this point, they may have any questions about how this works. But you're on 1 question per card. Raise your hand. If you need more cards, we'll be happy to give them to you. Ask as many questions as possible, and we'll do our best to get them all in. Any questions? Okay, Liz? Sure.
Thank you. And so now we'll begin our 1-minute opening statements, and we'll begin with Ward 5, Sarita Wilson.
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for putting this on. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I will not waste a bunch of time because we have a lot of people up here. I just want to tell everybody I really appreciate having the opportunity to do this again. This will be my 2nd term. I do hope that all offices have opponents, that we have contested elections every time, that it's a better process for democracy to have somebody run. So if you are thinking about running for office, do it.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to Ward 3 and begin with Allison Petrone.
Hi, my name is Allison Petrone. Can y'all see me over that? I'm very short. Anyway, I want to thank the League for having us here. And this is the very first time I've ever run for any elected position. So it's exciting for me. A little bit about my education and background. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from OU College of Law in 2003. I've been a small business owner and practicing lawyer for 15 years. I decided to run for city council after seeing the incredible divisiveness happening in the city and feeling like that city business was pretty much coming to a standstill over contentious issues. And so I hope to come and serve the city and have an open process and engage my ward. And I look forward to meeting so many of you in Ward 3 and just meeting as many people as I can. So I hope we learn a lot tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to use my minute to give you a synopsis of my educational and work background. I have a Bachelor of Science degree with a major in economics from Oklahoma City University and an MBA from the University of Portland. After college, I served for 6 years in the Air National Guard. My work background consists of 16 years in the communications industry with AT&T in various management positions in 7 different locations across the United States. I then spent 14 years in executive level management in the computer industry, including 2 years in Singapore, where I was the vice president of sales and marketing for all of Asia. Before retiring, I spent 2 years as the managing director of the Austin office of Scient, an internet consulting company. I have spent time volunteering at the United Way, the Lions Club, Norman Regional Hospital, served on the board of directors of the Austin Entrepreneurial Foundation, and most recently served as chairman of the Norman Seniors Association.
Patrick Ahern. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Good evening. I realized today, as I was preparing for this forum, that next year it will have been 100 years since the 19th Amendment was ratified, finally recognizing women's right to vote. And we've come a long way since then, but there's still a great deal of inequity in our society. And I believe that as a city council member, we have an obligation to address that. I believe that everyone deserves a voice. And that's part of the reason why I'm excited rather than apprehensive to come out as Norman's first Ward 3 openly bisexual candidate. I believe that as a member of the city council, I would be, to my knowledge, the only openly LGBTQ member at this current time, unless anybody else would like to come out this evening. But I hope that my other qualifications with a background in governmental law will uniquely qualify me to work with city staff on the complex and difficult issues that face our city. Thank you very much, and I'm excited to be here tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to Ward 7 and begin with Kyle Hurley.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Sandy. Thank you, League, and thank you, everyone, for coming here and everyone who is watching at home. I'm excited to be a part of this process, and this is an important part of our democratic process, which is getting to know us so that you all as citizens can make an informed decision on who you want to best represent you. I'm a lifelong Normanite. I was born here, raised here, graduated from Norman High. I went to paramedic school at Oklahoma City Community College, got my undergraduate degree from the University of Oklahoma, got my MBA from Southern Nazarene. I've worked in healthcare for the past 20 years, first 15 as a paramedic. And so I have seen firsthand what happens when things don't go well for Norman citizens. I think that I have been always wanting to help people. That's why I got into healthcare. I think that through Norman Rotary, as Councilman Hickman mentioned earlier, we have a call for service to self, and I'm hoping to take that spirit here to the city council, as well as collaborating with other city leaders and partners that I have built good relationships with over the course of my career. Looking forward.
I want to thank the League for putting this on. I want to thank all of you for coming out here to City Hall tonight and sitting through this. I am the current Ward 7 City Council member. I was first elected in 2013. I first ran when I was 26 years old in 2011. I didn't really know what I was doing. I had no money, and I lost in a runoff by just 21 votes in a city of 120,000 plus people. I ran 2 years later when I was 28 years old, and I won by just 28 votes. I am a walking example sitting up here of how every single vote can make all the difference in these local elections, even in a city with as many people as Norman. A little bit about my history, though, is I am from Norman. I'm a fourth generation Norman resident, native. My father graduated from Norman High in 1981. My grandfather worked at Central State Hospital for 42 years in the laundry and retired. And my great-grandfather, Charlie Holman, came here as a child and owned a business on Main Street for 50 years until he passed away in the 70s.
Sorry. Oh, good evening. My name is Kim Blodgett. I'm running for City Council for Ward 7. I am a teacher for Norman Public Schools. I teach 4th grade, and I love it. I'm a mom of 5. 2 of them we recently adopted. I'm new to politics, but I've seen the importance elected officials have, and I want to do my part and help shape Norman's future. I graduated from Northeastern State University, the Broken Arrow campus, and I have 2 of my children, my grown children. One has already graduated from the University of Oklahoma. She's a teacher in Tulsa. I have a son that is about to graduate from OU with a degree in political science. And I have a daughter that attends college at UCO in Edmond. and now I have a 2 and a 3-year-old. Starting all over again.
Hi, I'm Kate Bierman. I'm your Ward 1 City Council member. Many of you know me already, but for those who don't, I grew up in Vermont, traded the small town for the big city when I went to American University in Washington, D.C. with a degree in political science. I spent 10 years working on issue management campaigns in Oklahoma City. And but living that kind of dual life of working in Oklahoma City, but living and volunteering my time in Norman really wasn't working for me very well, particularly since I gave birth to our first child 6 months after I was sworn into my seat in July of 2017. So I traded the commute and bought into a successful doggy daycare business here in Norman. I helped expand it to a second location and doubled our staff. And so I am happy to be here tonight. And the one last thing, while I have 7 seconds left, is I had a couple hearing impaired people tell me to make sure that everyone spoke clearly and closely into the microphone. So thank you.
Sean Williamson Jennings.
I don't have that. There it is. Hi, I'm Sean Williamson Jennings, and I've spent the last 16 years working in the helping profession as a substance abuse prevention specialist, where I provide training and technical assistance to 9 states and 5 tribes. And so, the training part is pretty easy. I provide training, but the TA piece is a little harder. I help people problem solve their issues around substance abuse in states, communities, and tribes. I've spent the last 10 years living here in Norman with my husband, Michael Jennings, and our 2 dogs that we've rescued. What's important to me certainly is bridging the communication gap between Ward 1 residents and City Council. I believe that folks in my ward want to be heard and need to be heard, and I certainly want to be the conduit for them being heard. I think it's important that we address transportation in this community. As I've knocked doors, folks have talked a great deal about what can we do to get CART services prepared, and I also want to address trauma.
Thank you. The league has drafted an initial question for the candidates to answer. And we're going to begin with Stephen at this end and just go around the horn or the U to conserve time. But I would say that for our first forum with the mayoral candidates, we had a lot of questions that were directed for the mayor and the city council candidates. And so I'll probably be using some of those questions, but if you think of something new that you want to ask or you want to address it to a specific ward, please feel free to do that and pass it back to the screeners in the back. So, Stephen, we'll begin with you on the first question. The Norman Transportation Plan calls for the expansion of CART and the development of a light rail system that connects the communities of the Oklahoma City metro area. In light of the University of Oklahoma's recent indication that they wish to reduce, if not totally eliminate, their role in the maintenance of the CART system, is this an attainable goal? As a council member, would you support that development, and how would the city be able to fund these systems?
I appreciate the question. As a council member, I have used my vote to support these initiatives over the last 5.5 years. I've served as an alternate on the RTA Regional Transit Dialogue Group in Oklahoma City. I have been a proponent for over 10 years now of what I view as a Oklahoma City metropolitan transit system. It's been mentioned, the rail part gets mentioned a lot because it's what's really popular and it's what really excites people. But the RTA is about a comprehensive, connected system. The commuter rail system, and I want to be clear, commuter rail is much different than light rail. Commuter rail system connecting Norman to downtown Edmond and Tinker Air Force Base cannot work properly without a bus system that operates in accordance with it. And we can be part of that. It is going to be expensive. And one of my big concerns is that the proposed funding source is a sales tax increase. That is
I am also excited about the possibilities for the Regional Transit Authority, but I want to go back and talk about the CART first. And so, as you all know, OU issued a letter to the city saying that they was going to reduce the amount of funding going towards the CART system. So, at the end of the day, I think we need to talk about not just about funding, but we also need to talk about things that we need to owe to our citizens. And I think the CART service, we need to come forward as a city council, and I believe that they have already done this, but we also need to recommit to the citizens saying that CART service needs to continue. How are we going to fund it? Well, I think that we've already heard some really good conversations about, we hear about stormwater utility that's going to help out with the budget. We hear things about reapportioning portions of the TIF or ending the TIF altogether. That will help out with the short term. And so as the budget starts to become a little bit more black in the sense as opposed to red, then I think that we can begin having conversations about where that money needs to go. And I believe that funding our CART.
Kim?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I am all for this light rail system happening. I also agree with both of my opponents that we need to start at CART first. It's just such a dire need for this community. Every day when I'm driving to work, I see the need. I see the people at the bus stops and in the weather, and it actually just breaks my heart. I see young children at the bus stops. I want to stop and pick them up and take them where they need to go. I also think that before we can even, I just think it's also a matter of that is very high priority, but we also need to be focusing on this storm water utility and making it fair and equitable for everyone. And both of these need to be definitely top priority.
I believe the RTA, Regional Transit Authority, and light rail system will give us a great opportunity as a community to provide a reason for young people to stay living in our community because they will be able to commute to any job they want easily. It will give better opportunities to lower income folks and possibly the folks in our disabled community. I do have concerns about funding it, and funding CART I think should be a priority. I do think that part of the problem with CART is it operates within a silo, and if we can have overlapping community bus service between Moore and South Oklahoma City and airports and things like that, then we'll have a better opportunity for success.
I'm very excited about the prospect of a light rail. Any excuse to avoid I-35, I'll take. But it's more than just that. I think that the ability to move about as a citizen without a vehicle is one of the inequities that we need to address. If you don't have a car, you can't get many places to do business. You can't get many places to eat or to work. And so as part of a comprehensive transportation plan that makes Norman more travelable as a whole via bike or foot, I think that CART is an extremely high priority. Funding can be accomplished through, of course, the normal means of sales tax, although that is regressive. But I think that also partnering with private technology industries may give us an opportunity of investment into a system that can be a community-based partnership.
Okay. Norman has joined the RTA to implement a commuter rail system. The first meeting of the RTA is February 20th, so we're years away from any kind of implementation. Norman's share of that cost will be about 12% of the amount not covered by federal funds. That could be in the area of $50 to $60 million and will have to be paid for with sales taxes. The biggest challenge to the CART services is also funding. And in FY20, that means finding another $1 to $2 million in a budget that's already running a deficit. But we must maintain all of our current services. We need to reapportion enough money from TIF number 2 to cover the CART costs and as much as the budget deficit as possible. The city of Norman does not have the expertise on hand to take over day-to-day operations of CART, so I believe we need to ask Embark to assume that responsibility. This will also make the integration of CART into the commuter rail system easier. I support the long-term implementation for a regional commuter rail system and the short-term assumption of CART.
So I too am very excited about the RTA, but I want to talk about CART first because it is the most important element to this, in my opinion, for an inclusive city. We have to make sure that our residents, all of them, have the opportunity to succeed. One of the ways we can pay for CART, we need to be having the funds that are currently being taken by OU that they are eligible for, the federal funds that they're eligible for from the city of Norman. We need to recoup those and be using those. I think that we also need to, obviously, others have spoken of the TIF, and that needs to happen as well, be using some of those funds. We need to further investigate any potential grants and federal funds if we're able to show them a master plan type of situation that goes with the RTA. We always want to look for those. And then I agree with my partner over here that we need to look at short-term contracts, possibly with Embark for the interim, so that we can really have a robust plan and a full CART access for everyone.
So the CART system is a pretty big sore spot for the east side. CART routes on the east side end between 12th and 24th along Alameda and Lindsay. We don't have a CART stop at the East Side Library. We don't have one going to Sitel. We don't have one going to the Veterans Center. And this transition from OU to the city of Norman presents a pretty unique opportunity for the city. There have not been many instances where a public transit system has been transitioned from another entity to a city. And so we have a real opportunity to rebuild and re-envision CART from the ground up and make sure that those who need the service the most are able to access it. And I know that that's the case because I walked from deep within one of my ward neighborhoods to the nearest CART stop. It was 1.2 miles and it took me 25 minutes. I am not disabled. I was not bringing my child and I was not carrying groceries. So CART needs to be a first priority, but it can then be integrated into the RTA.
Like everybody else, I'm excited about the RTA system. But one of the things that I want you all to remember is Norman's a great place to be. So when we talk about the RTA system of getting people out of Norman, let's talk about the great thing of getting people to Norman. So then I do want to move to the CART services because it's a big issue in Ward 4. So I talked to a lady named Patricia, and she said her husband drives the bus. And she's concerned about his job, and she's concerned about the people who live off of Creekside who may struggle to find a ride. And so I do believe that we need to find the funding, and I think the funding can be found through federal grants. I work on a grant, so certainly federal grants through the Federal Transportation Administration. There are grants for cities through job commuter applications. We know that OU is giving us 16 of their 28 buses, and so utilizing those those buses as well. But our best benefit is to partner with those other communities, partner with Oklahoma City more so that we can have a strong budget.
Thank you. I'll address this question to Sean first, and then we'll just move along to you. Do you support the stormwater utility as currently proposed by council and set for citywide vote? Why or why not?
So I do not support the stormwater utility as it is, though I am going to vote for it because just like you all, I think we need to do something. And I'm willing to just take something at this point. And I think that there are a lot of people who are the same boat. I think it's a regressive tax. I think that we are not asking our commercial partners to pay their fair share. I think the agricultural piece is confusing to people. And so to me, I believe that we just might not pass it. But I do believe that every year, I think city council should come knocking at the door and ask our community members, if not this year, then when? And if not this, then what? And I'd love to be sitting on city council as we work through that situation.
Thank you, Kate.
So, is it on?
Okay. So the stormwater utility has been one of the biggest problems that City Council has had a really difficult time solving. And I did vote to put this stormwater utility plan to a vote of the people because I believed we had worked on it long enough and it was time for voters to make the ultimate decision on it. I believe that the bond is more palatable likely and more equitable than the utility. It has a list of concrete, literally and figuratively, projects that voters can look at and assess and really be able to see the impact of. And I think, we went around and around about the utility and about the rate. Do I think it's perfectly fair? No. Do I think it was fair enough to put to a vote of the people? Yes. And so, I was conflicted when I got up on the dais, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to support it. But, after hearing a lot of the feedback, I felt that it wasn't my job to inhibit the voters from making the final determination. And so we'll find out in April how voters.
Okay, so I am a person who wants to see the entire plan, and we've been asking for quite some time to see the policies and procedures, and I know that staff will get those to us before the vote in April, but there are many crucial points that will come out in that, and I can't tell you definitively how I'm going to feel about it or what I'm even going to do as far as my vote is concerned until I see, as they say, the devil's in the details. I want to see the details. However, my concerns, I will say, is that there are no incentives for best practices. And I would like to see us all be able to have an opportunity to reduce our bills if we are using science-backed best practices to help the city reduce its runoff. I'm concerned that there are no commercial caps. This puts small business having to pay for the runoff of the very biggest parcels in town. And as a small business owner, that's very difficult to be under that kind of stress.
Okay, this is not a vote about a problem. This is a vote about an opportunity. What this gets us is clean water and safe streets, and we absolutely need to do those things. The way to do it is through a utility, and so we absolutely need to pass the stormwater utility. Right now, we're using $3.1 million out of the general fund to do the work that we're doing to get these good things for the community, and that money will have to go up. If we choose to not vote for the stormwater, those costs do not go away. We just pay for them out of the general fund, and that takes a fund that's already in a serious deficit situation and makes it worse. We need to pass this. We need to get it in operation. Now, it may not be totally fair, but it is good enough. And so let's move forward with it and get it in place.
Thank you, Patrick.
I support the stormwater utility. I have a background in the Public Utility Division of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, working with electric, gas, and water cases. And one thing I noticed in every single one of those is that nobody likes paying for utilities. It doesn't matter how much it is, it's always going to be a cost that people feel as burdensome. That said, the longer you leave a utility without touching it, without implementing a plan to address the concerns that the utility is meant to address, the greater that shock is going to be when those rates go into place. We can't ignore the issue forever. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. We need a stormwater utility. We need it now, and the details can come out later. We've got a great plan that's been worked on for 2 years now by city staff, and I trust them. I think that they've come up with a good structure, and if we need to address it later, if we need to revise it once we have more data, we can.
This is the question to end all questions, and for me and my career on city council, do I support the stormwater utility plan? Yes, because the Stormwater Citizen Committee worked for well over a year on this plan. There were lots of folks from lots of different places. We had very good representation in my ward. It's going to be a compromise for everybody, so I feel like it's kind of like a hybrid bicycle. It's not really good for anything, but it gets you where you're going. Does that make sense? I personally fought for ag credits and the neighborhood assistance. I didn't really fight for it. It was offered up, but I think it benefits my ward greatly. And I know that there are people in my ward that do not see that, but the neighborhood assistance can actually help us with our crumbling private infrastructure that's very dominant in my ward. and the ag credit.
Thank you. If I'm just being 100% honest here, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on this yet. There are more forums coming up, so please, maybe I will have my mind made up by then. I just don't think it's fair and or equitable for small business owners. And I realize that it is something that we really need. We've needed this for quite a while now. And so I feel like we've reached a deadline. And so now council is like, it's crunch time. We need to do this now, no matter what. And so I'm a little worried about that. And so so I will be in touch with how I plan to vote on that, because I'm not 100% sure how I will vote.
Thank you. I absolutely support this, is the short version. Now, here's the long version. Is it a perfect plan? No. Is it something that we can do? Absolutely. So wind the clock back a few years, and so we all voted down by 70%, the stormwater utility fee proposed before. So what happened? The city council went back to the drawing boards, as they should, and they had a citizens committee that got involved with the stormwater utility staff, Dr. Carrie Evanson, and they did a fantastic work, and they put together a proposal. Council said, hey, let's get some more options on here, and so they have done that. And so how long are we going to talk about this? And so, like I said, is it a perfect plan? No, it is not, but I do support doing this. I also have a very personal investment in this because, as a former paramedic in this town, I have gone on just about every swiftwater rescue that you can go on. I'm tired of seeing people drowning in their cars. I'm tired of seeing firefighters being swept off as a result of trying to save them. Let's vote on this. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
I do support the stormwater utility and the bond. As long as I've been on the city council, I've considered stormwater to be the absolute #1 issue facing this city. It has been for decades, in my opinion. We have decades-long backlog of problems that we need to fix. It is a public safety issue. It's an environmental issue. It's a water quality issue. And I agree. I grew up raised by a single father, growing up living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Norman. I know about equality, and I know the impact on low-income residents. This is not a perfect plan. It's not 100% equitable. I think when you look at the bond and the utility rate combined, the larger commercial properties in the bond are going to pay a significant property tax in that. And when you combine that with the utility fee, I think it is closer to being equitable, but it is not perfect. I'm willing to pay $3 a month for my 2-bedroom apartment to fix this mega problem in Norman once and for all. And I encourage everybody, I implore you, please vote for.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to address this question to Ward 3 first, beginning with Allison. Given that the current building codes are costing residents and businesses money in the form of higher utility bills, do you support raising the codes to the 2015 efficiency standards so that all construction meets the recommendations of the U.S. Department of Energy?
Yes. So that was actually part of what I was going to say before, and we answered this question. I want to say that the city also has an obligation to bring our commercial codes up to standard for the stormwater aspects of this as well. We are very behind on a lot of commercial codes, and we do need to be looking forward, not backward and just being stagnant. We've been high-centered for a while. RF 100 is another component that we can look at with that. So yes, I am very much supportive of us sitting down with staff and saying, where can we work, whether it be with the UN or the UN plan. There are so many guides out there and low impact development that we can sit down with staff and come up with new building codes that are also more construction friendly as well. Because at this point, we have conflicting codes, and that's even more frustrating.
Thank you. Richard.
Yes, I do support bringing them up. This is the same situation that you would have been looking at in stormwater 20 years ago or 15 years ago. If we don't do it now and we have to do it later, it will just be a bigger problem. If we do it now, yes, it'll cost a little bit more in the development of the buildings that get done, but it will not be put off and be an ongoing problem that we have to solve with a bigger expense later on.
Thank you. Patrick?
I support this as well. The first thing I thought when the question was read was we're not already complying with the 2015 standards. It's 2019. We need to catch ourselves up every single time that one of these new sets of standards comes out. It's not just a matter of public safety. It's a matter of keeping Norman modernized. It's a matter of keeping us at the forefront of what a community should look like and how a community should behave when it's developing. I think that this should be a priority as far as policy, and once we have it in place, we should look towards getting ahead of the next set of efficiency standards and being already prepared when those come out.
Thank you. For Ward 5, Sarita?
Yes, I support that. I sit on the Community Planning and Transportation Committee, and we've gone through a bunch of ordinances. We've looked at some incentives for residential building codes, that the HERS ratings, and giving some incentives for building and compliant with that. And so, yeah, I support that. I was one of the folks that was very supportive of the RF 100. So anything we can do to make our city the best city, the most green city, and to lower our carbon footprint, I'm in support of.
Thank you. For Ward 7, Kyle?
Thank you. I also support this. I think coming up to current codes, everything that everyone has said here already, I definitely agree with. However, we also can't talk just about raising us to the current codes without talking about how exactly we're going to do that. So one of the things that I did over the course of the past 2 weeks is I sat down with Jane Hudson, who is our interim director of our planning. And so one of the things we need to also talk about is, do we have the city staff in place in order to enforce said codes and to prepare our commercial builders for whatever we're looking for? So when I sat down with her, one of the things I found out is that they have one commercial plans examiner right now. And so I said, do they grow on trees? I mean, is that a community college thing? Is that a degree? And she said they're very difficult to come by. Short version is it takes about 3 weeks to get a new permit to work here in the city. Whereas if you go up to Oklahoma City, it'll take about.
Yes, I do support this. I think it's important that all new construction, Norman, meet current codes when it comes to energy efficiency. We've been talking as mentioned by others in the Community Planning and Transportation Committee about green building codes and incentives. Norman is already a very environmentally friendly community. We already set a lot of the standard in the state of Oklahoma for other communities to follow. This is another opportunity for Norman to lead the way and set an example. And as another candidate mentioned, we don't just have to meet these standards. As in Norman, I think we should be striving to do even better and look at how we're going to go beyond what those regulations are from 2015. But I do agree, too, we have to be looking at what the cost of those are as well. Many do argue that Norman is the most expensive city to build new things in Norman, for a new family to locate in Norman. And so we need to be reviewing all of those things and making sure that Norman is also affordable.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I definitely support this. It actually, when it made me think of, as a teacher, our standards change all the time, whether we want them to or not. And they bring them to us and they say, here, teach this now. So we have to sit down and review them and then implement them with our students. So we have to stay up to date. So I definitely support this. We should be up to date and then move beyond that, because I think Norman is such a good city and people look to us for leadership. And so we need to live up to that. So yes, I definitely support that. I think we could, Ready for 100 could help with that. I attended a meeting with them, learned a lot. So yes, 100% support this. Thank you.
So I will echo everyone here and say that I do support us updating our building codes. To kind of supplement the discussion, though, I don't want to just reiterate what everyone else has said, is that when we think about higher utility rates for businesses locating to Norman, we also have to think about this as an economic development issue. If we have old buildings or buildings that are not being built up to code and they're experiencing higher utility rates because we're not being as energy efficient as we need to be, that does not encourage a passive economic development. We need to be doing these things to be a modern city so that businesses will want to come to Norman and know that they're not going to be having higher overhead than they otherwise would in other cities. So I do support this. I think we need to be incorporating even stronger energy efficiency. And I think the city needs to lead the way with that. I would like to see renewable energy on every single building. We've missed the boat with solar panels on our city buildings. And so we need
like everybody says, it's the hard thing about going last, right? So yes, I agree with you all on that. And also like Kate said, to supplement the conversation, certainly we never want to be behind, and presently it appears that we are behind. But there are some things that we can do to help businesses as they go through this process. So we know that new businesses, there's a permitting tax, the excise tax. What can we do to provide rebates or get rid of some of these so that people can have the funds to make sure that they are renewable and that they are meeting these codes? We certainly want to use renewable energy. If we've got a vision for being 100% renewable, then we certainly need to set out a plan. And the first step in this plan is just getting caught up for the city of Norman.
I'll address this question to Ward 7 first. Kimberly, what would you do to improve conditions at Griffin Park and the baseball fields and facilities to ensure that the current teams continue to stay there, since they will not be moving to Reeves Park anytime soon?
Thank you for that question. I know that this is indeed an issue. As a teacher, I go there and watch a lot of my students play their games, and I've heard their concerns. As far as what I would do to help the fields, I'm not sure, but I'm just going to be totally honest with you. That is something that I haven't looked into enough, and so that is something I'm going to definitely research as soon as I leave here. So I do know that the need is there. I do hear from my families, and so I would do whatever needed to be done to fix to help them out to where they stay there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that, an investment into our, not just our parks, but also into our ball fields. This is what makes Norman attractive to families. And so, I think that we all realize the importance of making Norman, really kind of a destination place for people to want to move. And we're talking about families or people wanting to start families, I think looking to what we can do at Griffin. So, what do we need to do? I think this is where, we work with Judd Foster. We work with the Parks and Rec Department because they know the parks better than anybody else. And so now, how exactly are we going to fund that? Well, we can take a look at some of the different funding mechanisms. We can look at, does this come out of the general fund? Are we going to look into like Norman Forward Part 2? And so, but I do think that there is an importance of this. What exactly does that plan look like? I'm going to defer that to the experts in the Parks and Rec Department and see what their thoughts would be on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
So Griffin Park is part of a larger Parks and Rec plan that was approved in Norman Forward by Norman voters in 2015. The plan is to actually move all the youth baseball and softball fields that are at Griffin Park now to Reeves Park, as was mentioned earlier in the question. The issue that we're having is that currently at Reeves Park, you have adult softball fields that are in use and used pretty regularly. The plan in Norman Forward is to relocate those adult softball fields and youth football fields into a new complex somewhere else in Norman. We have had a hard time finding a location to do that, and it's holding up the other projects. So the future plan is for Reeves Park to be the youth baseball and softball field, and for Griffin Park to be the youth soccer complex. My concern is that while there is a holdup, that maybe that maintenance on those current fields at Griffin are not being kept up in anticipation for them being moved. So I would want to work with Parks and Rec staff to make sure that the current funds we have are still going to the proper.
Thank you. Sarita for Ward 5.
Well, again, I want to say thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. I do think that we have plenty of dominoes about to fall and land deals that are kind of coming together, that the Norman Forward projects are going to go forward. I think I agree with Councilmember Holman down there, and that we need to make sure that the maintenance that's supposed to be being done is being done. But then I want to pivot to Little Lax ball fields. I would actually probably put more funds into Little Lax than I would to Griffin, because that park and those facilities get forgotten. And I do think there are some projects that are slated from the Norman Forward funds, but being so far out there, it gets forgotten many times. And so I would fight you for those funds for Griffin to give them to Little Lax.
Thank you. For Ward 1, Sean.
Am I on? Okay. I like Councilmember Clark and a planner. And so I think that in any good plan that you start first with a needs assessment. So what is the problem at Griffith Park? What is it that the players need? What is the family members need? I mean, we first have to ask those folks what their needs are so that we can begin to plan, so we can have a data-driven decision-making process. Far too often in Norman, we sort of pull together a small group of people who speak for everybody, but we don't go back to the data. What are the data telling us, and what do the people truly want and need? Because I can certainly say they want bigger fields. It's a need for maintenance, but I want to go back to the people who are involved and talk to them about what their needs are.
Thank you. Patrick for Ward 3.
Thank you.
Oh, skipped you. Sorry, skip Kate.
I wasn't going to presume to know what you're
You want Kate? Kate, yes. Sorry.
So I think that the families who use the ball fields at Griffin, they know what they want. They want their fields maintained, and in a perfect world, they would want a clear plan to move their complex, as Councilmember Holman said, to Reeves Park. And unfortunately, prior city councils have failed them in that. This is a consequence of not securing land acquisition prior to the Norman Forward vote. All of these timelines have been scuttled because city council failed to do its due diligence and acquire the land or have signed agreements for the land before we promised the community a path forward. And so we do have, as has been stated, a current maintenance budget for the Griffin Park fields. We need to be sure that these fields are being maintained. And then we need to double and triple down on the efforts to secure a location for the projects that we said we were going to have land for. And so I really think it's going to be as simple as maintaining our current plan to maintain the fields and move forward with North.
Thank you. Now, Patrick.
I remember it was about 25 years ago, I was playing t-ball in Griffin Park, and there was one of those flash rainstorms where it just dumps a bucket on you in 5 minutes. And every single one of the stretches between the bases just turned into a trough of mud. And we spent the rest of the game slipping and sliding around. And it sounds like there hasn't really been any maintenance done since then. I think that we really need to throw them some love. Let's make sure that these fields are safe to play on. Let's make sure that they're up to date. And until we do get the land that we need to move them elsewhere, let's make sure that they're fun to play on. That's the whole point.
Thank you. Allison?
So as a mom who is out at Griffin, pretty often I can say that for 99 cents, we can buy some Clorox wipes and clean the bathrooms. We could start there. My goodness, they're scary. So yes, I guess that falls under maintenance, Councilmember Holman, and we need to definitely, the communal areas, like all the bathrooms need to be kept up. Also, I would say better lighting. I know that we did some lighting projects on the soccer fields, but if we can put in for night games in the baseball fields, I don't know what's been done there as of recent, but I know the soccer fields got it. And then I guess if you're saying that there are players that are going to Oklahoma City's club, is that what the problem
No, I
seems
don't
to
think
be?
so I think some of that's supposed to move to
Right, I
a
understand
different
the
area in
fields.
Norman.
Okay, I think what I was understanding in the question is that kids may not be wanting to continue to stay there. And if to keep kids there, I certainly think we could.
Yes, you're right. You're
I
right.
certainly think that we could look at implementing maybe a plan for a reduction in the first season for Reeves if you've stuck it out during the time at Griffin. So maybe we can look at that.
Oh, oops, come on. Okay, I'd like to continue with Councilmember Holman's story because I too agree that the plan should be continued. And right now it's just hung up because we didn't get some of the pieces in place when we thought we would. So right now the Griffin Park baseball fields can stay where they are. They just need some maintenance. Griffin Park was destined in the Norman Ford funds to be purchased for $10 million, but they executed a long-term lease for $2.4 million. So that $7.6 million that's left over is supposed to be moved to the senior center. We can easily take $1 million out of that and reallocate it to the Griffin Park baseball maintenance activities, leave the remaining money for the senior center there. Then we can take cultural center funds that are in the TIF, which can legitimately be used on a north base location, and move that extra $1 million over and maintain the full funding for the senior center. That'll give you $1 million plus in terms of maintenance for the Griffin Park baseball fields where they are.
Thank you. I'll address this question to Ward 1 first. Kate, how would you support the interest of your ward constituents versus the interest of the city?
So this is going to dust off my political science degree, but this really comes back to the trustee versus representative style of government. You could be a direct representative of your people and you take a poll or go out into the community and get your finger on the thumb of the finger on the pulse of what your community wants and try and figure out what the majority wants. Or you could be entrusted to make the best decisions on behalf of your ward. And I don't think that any council member should be making that decision across the board. I think it needs to be issue by issue. There are going to be some issues that you just simply can't get a majority consensus on before you have to make a decision. And then there are going to be some issues where you really need to go out and do the legwork and see what your constituency wants. And so what I've tried to do is engage my ward in a variety of ways: in-person meetings, virtual town halls, individual face-to-face meetings, and really try and get a sense so that I can make that decision on a case.
Right. First, I think we should cast a wide net, and casting a wide net is doing just that. So part of the reason why I'm running is because our ward has not been talked to, and our needs have not been met. So if that was the case, again, I would not be running. I think that people want to be heard. I think that we will have been sent here by our ward, and it is important to hear from them, not just via Facebook, but and not just via a few texts or a few of your friends who are in the city council room, but really sitting down and talking to folks one-on-one. One of the things that I've told people on the doors is, should I get elected, I'll do two things. I will come back to your house and I'll ask you two questions. One, how am I doing? Two, what is it that you need? Because I think it's fair that if I'm knocking on your door asking you for your vote now, then later I should check up to see how I'm doing so I can pulse the community.
Thank you. For Ward 3, Richard?
Okay, there are 10,686 registered voters in my ward. When I get elected to the city council, I'm not going to take every issue and look over my shoulder and ask them to raise their hands and say where are 5,300 of those going to select. They elect me to come up here and make the best possible decisions I can make on their behalf. And I'm going to do that balancing the needs of the ward and the needs of the city. And most of the time that can be done reasonably well, as Kay said. But sometimes you just have to stand up and decide. And I'm expecting the people who elect me to put that trust in me to just make those decisions with the best of my ability and move forward well.
Thank you. Patrick?
I believe it's the obligation of a city council member to be a voice for the people they represent. You are not only an individual, but you have become part of the collective consciousness. You have become part of how the group of people that live around you in your community act and live and breathe. And as long as you are able to listen and convey that voice, I believe that it's very difficult to do wrong. I think that if you listen to everyone, not just the registered voters, not just the people you knocked on the door of, but every single person in the ward, you'll get a good sense of not only the ward, but the whole of the city as well. Every part grows and flourishes with the rest of it. And so the sense of scope and impact perspective that we have to have as council members, therefore needs to be balanced, not based on our viewpoints ourselves, but on the voices of those around us.
Okay, so this is where I believe we can tie back into the boards and commissions as well. I think that if we have the proper representation from each ward on boards and commissions, then there are more people that you can contact besides just your city councilor. But that is also important to say that process and how the council comes to a conclusion or a vote is really important. We have to have transparency. The public has to feel that they can trust what's happening with the body, and that their particular city councilor is accessible for personal issues that you might need to bring regarding municipal issues. And on that note, I'd like to thank Councilmember Castleberry for being very accessible. Regular ward meetings, I think, are incredibly important, and to keep the ward up to date. If something is controversial, I think that you need to go a little bit slower and make
Evan?
Accessibility for me is the most important thing. I believe that I am the most accessible member of the city council. And that's no slight to my colleagues, just that I have a day job that allows for anybody to come see me at any point during the day, and it happens regularly, to talk to me about city issues. I also work 2 nights a week at a popular music venue on Campus Corner called The Deli. I work the door until 2 a.m. And regularly people come to that door at night and talk to me. People that stay up at night that don't usually have an opportunity to talk to elected officials about what's going on in the community. That is the most important thing to me, is always being accessible to people, either in person or on social media. I have hosted 2 ward meetings every year, and always before we put an initiative in front of voters, I make it a point to have a ward meeting in person to have city staff and myself help explain these things. I am your representative at City Hall, and my job is to represent you the best I can and then relay the information about.
Thank you. Kimberly?
Yes. I do agree with Stephen and accessibility. It's being available. It's caring about that relationship with your constituents. It's not really fair for me to go out and knock on your door and interrupt your time with your family and ask for your vote, and then you never see me at your door again. So that is not what would happen. Relationships are very important to me. Relationships, obviously I'm a teacher, so with my students, very important. With my constituents would be equally as important. I think it's important to hold those ward meetings. I think it's important to change the location of them each time and make it more convenient for different constituents. It's about them. It's not about me. Thank you.
Thank you. Kyle?
I would also like to just confirm what Mr. Holman said, which is he is accessible. And so I would definitely want to be accessible as well. All you need to do is call 911, come to the ER, and we can have a good long chat. So, but I would like to echo what Councilmember Bierman said earlier, which is it's a balance. I mean, you are electing us to make decisions. And so you need to trust our decision-making ability. But I think it's also incumbent upon each of us to also realize what our limitations are, because I'm not able to make every single decision on my own just based off of the information I have. And that's where you reach out to your ward. We hear about ward meetings. We hear about reaching out to people at the doors. I will be walking my little terrier mix around the neighborhood basically every night. Now, he may do something on your lawn, and I apologize in advance, but I do want to make myself accessible. So it is a balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita.
Having the largest ward in the city geographically, landmass wise, has been quite the undertaking to connect with all of my constituents. But so I immediately started a ward meeting every second Saturday. It's very dependable. In the even months, it's at one church. At the odd months, it's at a different church. And Thunderbird Baptist Church would be the odd months, and Franklin Baptist Church is the even months, and we have this giant lake in between the churches. So who doesn't want to drive around the lake they go every other month, it seems like. So I would like to see, though, contact information for the representatives for the boards and commissions. That's something that I keep meaning to ask about. But because it seems like it's kind of hard to get a hold of your member. And also, I run a doggy daycare, so I know more people than Stephen Tyler Holman.
Okay, next question. I'll address this to Ward 3, Allison first. Can you tell us your development vision for Norman? And specifically, can we curb sprawl and protect open space?
I love that question. Yes, I think that it's actually very important to curb sprawl and to protect our open spaces. So my development philosophy, I guess, would be that quality of life and environmental atmosphere and concerns are really important for Norman's growth. We want people to come here because they want to be a part of our city. And we have a value, I guess, here. We have the kind of city where you come for festivals, and we want to be friends and neighbors. We want to be outside together. We have kids that play in our murals together. We really, if you ask me, in my opinion, and my interacting in this city, that is why people come here. That's why they want to raise families here. We really need to work on economic development that prizes our quality of life. I think that that's the
we really do need to concentrate on the 10 principles of smart growth. And part of that, of course, is maintaining your open space, concentrating your growth into already developed areas, and several other strong principles. But our city should concentrate more effort and more time in creating the opportunity to develop in those using those principles. We can do that by creating some more incentives for developers to use those, by making it easier for them to get permits in those environments, and letting them be creative in addressing that way to develop the city.
I think it's important to take a light hand with any kind of developmental incentives. I think that we can best provide for Norman's health by focusing on revitalizing the areas that need it first, and then worrying about expanding outward. I think that growth is inevitable. I think that Norman is a wonderful place to live, and people are going to continue to want to move here and live here. And so expansion is going to happen whether we want it to or not. The idea is, as Richard said, smart expansion. Let's use the resources that we have to prepare ourselves ahead of time for where we're going to end up. We want to look forward 5-10 years rather than 5-10 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarita.
Okay, I was writing out my answer. So that's been my whole platform, is to protect our green spaces, because I am the queen of the green spaces. That we have a comp plan that I would like to see our city follow diligently. I want to hold the line at 48th, and I'd like to see infill be prioritized. I would like to see our connection fees addressed in a way that holds the developer a little more accountable for the actual growth and the cost of that growth and what it costs our city in the long run. I maintain we in my ward, generally, if you're east of 48th, you maintain a 1 house to 10 acres. One of the things I did was enable that building opportunity to also be a tiny home. So you can have a tiny home on a big acreage, which was a dumb reason you couldn't have one. We had an ordinance against it. So I changed that with the help of
I think that development, just like anything else, needs to be intentional. I think that we need to have a plan for that. And how are we going to do that? I think that we look to our city partners who are already looking at this. We look towards the Chamber of Commerce. We look to the NEDC. We look to Visit Norman. I think that we have, by establishing good relationships with them and also working with our planning department, working with our city leadership, I think that's where we will develop a good development plan for Norman. We already have things in place. So I really appreciate what the city council has already done with respect to Center City and form-based code. I think that is looking more inward here and what can we do to enhance Norman, Center Norman. Also looking at, limiting sprawl, so protecting our green spaces. I think that's something that we definitely need to be protective of. How big should Norman be? I think that is a conversation that we all need to keep in the back of our minds, actually in the forefront of our minds, because as Councilmember Wilson says, we basically need to protect our green spaces and be conscientious of that. Thank you.
So my development vision for Norman. Norman this year is 130 years old, the city of Norman is. Before this city existed, this was open prairie land that was home to native tribes. Norman started out as just one street, Main Street, 6 blocks, and the people that lived on there. All of us sitting in this room today are here because of growth and development that has happened in this community over the last 130 years. It hasn't all been bad. We're all here because of it. I have consistently supported with my vote policies that encourage urban development and use of our existing infrastructure instead of building more sprawling infrastructure that is very expensive. I support the cutoff at 48th. There's also a cutoff north of Franklin Road between Franklin and Indian Hill. It's called the community separator. My biggest concern, though, about limiting sprawl and limiting height and density is turning into a place like Boulder, where they limit in height and sprawl, and the places become so unaffordable because they're
Yes, thank you. I am all for protecting our green spaces. I feel like we need to fix our pressing issues first, and then in order to attract developers to come to Norman. I was born here and love it here. My favorite place. I actually teach where I went to kindergarten at, and but I am struggling with convincing my son that is graduating from OU now to stay here, and that makes me sad. And so we have to do things to attract these OU graduates to stay here. And so all for new development and as we take care of our pressing issues. Thank you.
Sean?
I too agree that we should be intentional about the growth of our city. And that's why I think our growth should be iterative. So far too frequently, we just sort of throw up these big masses of whatever on the exterior of our city without just simply looking at some smaller growth first of all. But one of the things that I really believe that we can do is we can begin to incentivize developers for renovating pre-existing structures here in Norman. I think that it may also help us have affordable housing. It also may help us get mixed incomes in certain neighborhoods. And so those things are important. And I certainly know that it will help us save some of this space off of 48 that Sarita says, like, don't come out here just yet. And so I think that is important. So in short, let's incentivize people for using those structures pre-existing. And let's also be intentional and thoughtful about how we grow.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions about transparency of, Kate, sorry.
So these 1 minute answers are just killing me because I really just want to keep going on and on. But I am from the East Coast where land is at a premium. They don't have the luxury on the East Coast of just continuing to sprawl out, out, out. And so I agree with several of the comments here that we really need to be focusing on infill. And that helps us achieve our goal of a walkable community. But in addition to that, I have also long been a proponent of low cost, low impact outdoor recreational activity that also helps us preserve green space in our core. And one of the most recent that we're building is a bike skills course on the northwest corner of 24th and Lindsay. And it is a piece of land that has a topography that isn't well used for anything else, but it's going to be made into a bike skills course so that kids can bike down our complete 24th Street when it's completed and can scrape knees and, you know, do the things that kids do. And it helps preserve green space in our core.
And really not enough time. But we had a couple questions about transparency of campaign funds, and Brenda Hall is the expert, so she's just going to give a little public FYI on that.
Okay, the question was about how quickly these candidates would post their contributors' information ahead of the election so that people would be able to see. And so just to let you know, pre-election campaign reports are due sometime between tomorrow, January 29th, and February the 4th. Once those are filed in my office, they will be uploaded to our website, so they'll be available for anyone to see prior to the election, probably not on the 4th, but the 5th or so, the next day or so. We try to get those up as quickly as possible. So those will be up for you all to look at prior to the election.
Okay, so it's time for closing statements, and we're going to move in reverse order from the opening. So we'll begin with Ward 1 and Sean.
Hi. One of the things that I want you all to know about me is I see you, Colonial States. I see you, Summit Lake, as you try to address your dam. I see you, Colonial States, as you want to talk about the litter that lives there. I see you, Mary, Elizabeth, and Song, and Tina. I see my neighbors, and I appreciate you for telling your stories. And know that those stories, should I be elected, will not be ignored. Know that those stories will be addressed. I see you in your beauty, Eastside Norman, and I see you in your challenge. And I want to help you or be an advocate for you to address those challenges. Just like I'm a TA provider, I oftentimes tell people, like, I'm not here to be an expert for you. I'm simply here to be a guide. So I ask that on February 12th, you let me be an advocate and a guide for Ward 1.
Thank you, Kate.
So I've spent the last few years working in local government, starting with my volunteerism on the Animal Welfare Oversight Committee. And one of the reasons why I decided to move the rest of my life back to Norman was so that I could keep doing that. And I want to focus on transparency, accessibility, and some knowledge in policymaking, because that is what we're here to do, is to make policy. We talk about campaign finance. I'm one step ahead of the curve. Anyone can go to my website, kateforcouncil.com, and on the top bar, I have my list of donors as well as the amount that they've donated and where they live. I have a 6-minute response time on my Facebook page, and I'm proud of it. I too own a doggy daycare and am accessible pretty much any day of the week. I'm here in Norman all the time. And I have taken action to pass resolutions and ordinance changes like diaper changing stations to help improve the.
Thank you. For Ward 7, Kimberly.
I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to participate in this important forum. I look forward to continuing the conversations and encourage you to please ensure that everyone get out and vote on February 12th. It's not just city election happening. There are a very important school bond that will be on the ballot as well. I can't tell you how to vote on that, but I can encourage you to please get out and vote on February 12th. And again, I'm just very appreciative for this opportunity to be here tonight and to be able to talk with you. And hopefully I get to talk with more of you on another day. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, League, and thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. Thank you, Councilmember Castleberry, for allowing me to sit in your seat. So I think that, the reason why I'm here is because, I am a product of Norman. And so being born and raised here and establishing myself, and really, where my awakening was going through the Chamber's Leadership Norman program. And so we got introduced to local government. And so that was one of the things I had not paid attention to before. Oh, I'm paying attention now. And I believe that, everyone who is here, especially our current elected officials, I applaud them because public service is definitely a calling. So I would like to thank Councilmember Holman, Wilson, and Bierman for all that you do for Norman. I'm here because I want to serve Norman. I want to continue my Rotary mindset of service above self, what I've learned as a paramedic, which is, helping people. And so I believe that I can take that and bring that skill set to the city council.
I want to thank all of you again. I also want to thank my opponents in this race. One of my biggest things when I first ran for city council was I wanted people to be more interested in city council and what goes on here. A former Ward 7 council member from the last decade served for 10 years and ran unopposed for half of that time. It was disappointing to me that someone could serve in a city this large and no one ever run against them. So although they are running against me and I have to go campaign and stuff, I appreciate that because I'm glad to see people interested in this. For me, like I said before, I'm from Norman, 4th generation. I went to Kennedy Elementary School. I went to Irving Middle School. I went to Norman High after that. I grew up in Ward 7, which I represent now. I used to sit in that seat right there next to Mary Frances for over a decade watching these council meetings before I ever thought about running. I didn't think this was something I could ever do. I'm a shy introvert, but I love this city. I love doing this, and this is why I'm running again, so I can help make Norman a better place for everybody.
Thank you. For Ward 3, Patrick.
When I was 10 years old, I stood in front of the Norman City Council, and I spoke out against the XYZ loop that was planning on being built. It would have destroyed my home in Ward 5, as well as the largest waterfall in Cleveland County. And I never anticipated that I would be sitting up here addressing people's concerns and hopefully getting elected to the very position that I was trying to convince to see my way. I want to thank everyone here for giving us an opportunity to be heard and to let our voices be shared with all of you who want to know exactly what's going on in our heads and where we're planning on taking Norman. But most importantly, I'm thankful for the opportunity to provide a voice to those in my ward who I may end up representing here, and hopefully we'll be able to get the message out that everyone wants the city to hear.
Thank you. Richard?
Thank you. I hope I've represented myself well here and shown an ability to deal with issues, even if our time to do so is quite limited. If you would like more in-depth answers from me, just go to my website and fill out the form. It'll come directly to me. My wife, Connie, sitting back there in the back, and I are the only staff on our campaign. We have a couple of friends who are good as volunteers, but there's no consultant, no strategist, no organization behind us. Anything you see, hear, or read created by my campaign was done by me. I would like to urge you to look closely at my background and compare it to the background of all the current council members and everyone that's running for the council in all the wards. My work experience and skill set is completely different from anybody else, and it is suited to help address the major issues that the next council will face. So I believe I can add something unique and good to this team of 9 people, and I would ask that you support my efforts to do so.
Thank you. Allison?
Well, so I was looking back over this list of things that I was hoping to get to talk about today. And since we didn't, I'm just going to give you a list of things that I find very important that I would like to discuss at some point further. ADA compliance, mental health issues, addiction services, homelessness, affordable housing, food insecurity, domestic abuse, and responsible budget management here. I'm a working mom. I get your struggles, many of you. I mean, can't wait till the day that I'm retired. That'd be fantastic, but it's so far in the horizon, it doesn't even register. This is a time when I hope that the future for all of us is positive. We need to be optimists. We need to look at one another and see how we can help. We are friends and neighbors. We need to act like friends and neighbors. We need to be positive online. there are just, I look forward to the forums in the future because I really want to cover all of these.
Ward 5, Sarita.
Well, thanks for listening to me. I mean, I feel I have mixed emotions. On one hand, to be 100% transparent, I raised 0 funds for this campaign. On the other hand, I really, really enjoyed knocking doors in my 2017 campaign, and I knocked 2,000 doors, and it was one of my favorite things to do. I ended up knocking doors for some state candidates because I enjoyed it so much. I really like talking to people. And I think that it's an important part of democracy is to run against somebody, to be held accountable. It's why I came up here today to answer the questions, to give people in the community, you know, the opportunity to hear what my answer is to the question. And maybe I made somebody mad and they'll run against me next time. I don't know. But I think it's important that I applaud everybody that's running and everybody that's doing all that hard work, because it's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. And the seat is super rewarding, and asked to be on.
Our forum participants, our audience, and the vote will be Tuesday, February 12th, so please turn out. Thank you.
We have on our Who's Who is a list of all the boards and commissions in Norman that you can be a part of. And when they meet, if you want to check them out, please be a part of city government. Thank you.